The silver fork hit the marble floor with a sound like a gunshot, but it was the silence that followed that was deadly. In the center of the dining room, the man in the charcoal suit was turning a terrifying shade of bruised purple, his hands clawing at a throat that had forgotten how to breathe. Ariel didn't think, she moved. She was behind him in a blur of white linen and black polyester, her arms locking around his ribs for the Heimlich. But as the poison stake cleared his lungs, he didn't thank her. He leaned back, his eyes dark with a predator's clarity, and whispered against her ear, "Don't let them see you touched me." Just as three men at the corner table reached into their tailored jackets for the cold steel hidden beneath. The air in the Gilded Lily always smelled of saffron, old money, and Ariel's own exhaustion. It was 10:45 p.m., and she had been on her feet for 9 hours, her spine a straight line of disciplined iron that hid the fact that her rent was 4 days late. She smoothed her stark white apron, her hands steady despite the $4,000 bottle of Bordeaux she had just decanted. Ariel was used to being the help, the invisible black woman who anticipated every need before it was spoken, but her eyes, sharp and recalculating, saw everything. She saw the way the man in the charcoal suit didn't touch his wine. She saw the way the businessmen at table 4 never looked at their menus. 2 years ago, she had been a top-tier pre-law student at UChicago, until her mother's medical bills turned her dreams into a stack of past-due notices. Now, she lived her life in the shadows of the elite, counting tips to keep her younger sister in a dorm room and away from the grit of the South Side. She had perfected the art of staying unnoticed, never realizing that tonight, her invisibility was the only thing that would keep the ghost of soul alive. The piece of wagyu lodged in Kang Jun-suk's throat wasn't an accident, it was an execution dressed as fine dining. Ariel's arms were still locked around his ribs when she felt it, the unnatural weight of the meat, the chemical burn smell that didn't belong in a $200 steak. Her hands knew before her mind did. This wasn't choking. This was poison. The obstruction came free with a wet, violent sound, and Jun-suk's body went rigid against hers. His hand shot up, fingers closing around her wrist with the precision of a man who had choked others before being choked himself. "Service exit," he rasped, his voice like gravel scraped across bone. 30 seconds. Ariel's brain screamed at her to let go, to step back into the safety of her invisibility, but her body had already made a different choice. She felt the shift in the room before she saw it, the way the 3 men at table 4 rose in perfect synchronization, their movements too smooth, too rehearsed. The kind of choreography that came from killing together before. The gunman closest to them didn't bother with subtlety. His hand emerged from his jacket holding a suppressed pistol, the barrel tracking toward Jun-suk's skull with the cold efficiency of a man paid to make problems disappear. Ariel's hands moved on instinct, shoving the marble-topped dessert cart between them just as the first shot whispered through the air. The bullet punched into a $400 chocolate soufflé, sending dark ganache spraying across white tablecloths like arterial blood. The restaurant erupted into controlled chaos. The kind where the wealthy didn't scream, they simply moved with the quiet urgency of people who understood that survival was a matter of speed and silence. Crystal shattered. Chairs toppled. A woman in a Chanel suit dropped to her knees with the grace of someone who had practiced this before. Jun-suk's hand found the small of Ariel's back, guiding her toward the kitchen with a pressure that was both a request and a command. She could feel the heat of him, the way his body radiated a controlled violence that made the air around them feel thinner. "You just signed your death certificate," he said, and there was something almost apologetic in his tone. "They saw you save me. You're a witness now." Behind them, the second gunman vaulted over a table, his weapon rising. Ariel didn't look back. She pushed through the swinging kitchen doors into the bright, harsh fluorescence where her coworkers stood frozen, knives in hand, eyes wide with the understanding that the world they thought they knew had just been rewritten in gunfire and blood. "Move!" Jun-suk commanded, and Ariel realized with cold, absolute clarity that she wasn't escorting a customer to safety. She was running for her life with the man everyone wanted dead. The service tunnel smelled like bleach, grease, and desperation. Ariel's hand found the cold metal of the emergency exit handle as gunfire cracked through the kitchen behind them. No suppressors now, just raw violence echoing off stainless steel. Jun-suk stumbled, his weight suddenly heavy against her shoulder, and she realized the poison was still working through his system, turning his lethal precision into something mortal and vulnerable. "This way," she hissed, pulling him into the narrow corridor that only the staff knew existed. The tunnel ran beneath the restaurant like a secret artery, connecting to the building's original speakeasy infrastructure from the 1920s. She'd used it 100 times to avoid the creep of a line cook, never imagining it would become an escape route from professional killers. Their footsteps echoed in the confined space, his breathing labored and wet. Jun-suk's hand pressed against the concrete wall for balance, leaving dark smears that Ariel tried not to identify as blood. "How far?" he managed, his voice stripped of its earlier command. 200 feet. There's an alley exit behind the loading dock." She could hear them now, the hunters, their voices cutting through the darkness with the efficient cadence of men who had cornered prey before. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands stayed steady. 2 years of carrying trays through impossible crowds had taught her how to move in tight spaces without hesitation. The alley door burst open with a metallic shriek, and Chicago's November rain hit them like a baptism of ice and neon. The downpour turned the pavement into a mirror of reflected street lights and blood. Ariel gasped, the cold shocking her system alive, but Jun-suk moved with sudden, terrible clarity. His gun materialized from inside his jacket, a matte black piece of engineering that looked like it cost more than her entire year's salary. He didn't point it at her. He aimed past her shoulder, his body pivoting with the fluid economy of a man who had killed in worse conditions. "Down!" he commanded, and Ariel dropped without thinking. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space, the muzzle flash illuminating the silhouette of a man who had been 3 steps behind them in the tunnel. The pursuer crumpled without ceremony, his weapon clattering against wet brick. Jun-suk's hand found her arm, hauling her upright with a strength that shouldn't have existed in a poisoned man. "You know this city?" It wasn't really a question. "South Side born," Ariel said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Then choose, lose me in these streets, or die with me when the rest of them arrive." His eyes, dark and calculating even through the pain, studied her face. "Decide now." Behind them, the service door exploded open, and Ariel made the choice that would end her old life forever. She ran. The basement beneath the abandoned Korean bathhouse smelled like mildew and forgotten rituals. Ariel's fingers trembled as she twisted the rusted padlock, a safe house Jun-suk had directed her to through gritted teeth and precise street coordinates. The door gave way to darkness, and the ghost of steam that had stopped rising decades ago. "Lights, back left corner," Jun-suk managed, his body sagging against a tiled wall painted with faded lotus flowers. Ariel found the switch, and a single bulb flickered to life, illuminating a space that looked like it had been waiting for exactly this kind of emergency. Medical supplies. Bottled water. A steel table that had seen use before. She eased him onto the table, and he didn't fight her, which told her more about his condition than any words could. His shirt was soaked through, rain, sweat, and the dark stains spreading from his side where a bullet had grazed him during their escape. "I need to see it," she said, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Jun-suk's eyes found hers, assessing. Then he unbuttoned his shirt with hands that shook just slightly, revealing a body mapped with old scars and new damage. The bullet wound was shallow but angry, the poison still working its way through his system in waves of tremors. "You have medical training?" His voice was softer now, stripped of command. "Pre-law. But I had 2 younger siblings and a single mother who worked doubles." She reached for the antiseptic, her movements clinical despite the insanity of the situation. I've stitched up worse in a kitchen at 2 a.m. He watched her work with the intensity of a man recalculating risk. Her hands cleaned the wound, applied pressure, moved with the efficiency of someone who had learned to save people because no one else would. Why didn't you run? He asked finally. In the alley? You could have disappeared. Ariel's hands paused. They saw my face. You said it yourself. I'm a witness. She met his gaze. And I don't leave people to die. Not even. She gestured at him, at the gun still holstered at his hip, at the violence he carried like a second skin. Whatever you are. Kang Jun-suk, he said, and the name felt like a confession. The ghost of soul. And currently a dead man whose own people want him buried. A bitter smile crossed his face. You saved the wrong customer. There's no wrong customer when someone can't breathe. She wrapped the wound with practiced hands. That's the problem with you people. You think everything is strategy. Sometimes a person just acts. Jun-suk's hand caught her wrist, gentle this time, not restraining. That impulse will get you killed in my world. Your world came to me, Ariel said quietly. I was just trying to make rent. He studied her for a long moment, then released her. Then I owe you a debt. And I always pay what I owe. Ariel's phone buzzed at 3 a.m., the screen illuminating the basement's darkness with a violence that made her flinch. Jun-suk's hand moved toward his weapon before he registered the sound as non-threatening. She grabbed the phone, her stomach dropping as she read the notification from her restaurant's staff group chat. Emergency meeting tomorrow 10 a.m. police investigation. Everyone must attend. But it was the message beneath that turned her blood to ice. A private text from Marcus, the floor manager. Ariel, Mr. Chen asking about you. Says you left something at his table? We'll hold it in the office. Her hands went numb. No, she whispered. Jun-suk was upright instantly, his body moving through pain with pure predatory focus. What is it? Chun. The name tasted like poison on her tongue. David Chen. Table 7, every Thursday night, 8 p.m. sharp. Peking duck, always. Her voice cracked. He knows my name. He asks about my sister. He tips 40%. Describe him. Jun-suk's voice had gone flat, professional. Late 50s. Silver hair, expensive watch. Speaks Mandarin and Korean. Always alone, but people come to his table like. She stopped, seeing it now, the pattern she'd been too exhausted to notice. Like he's holding court. Chen Wei-min. Jun-suk's expression turned deadly. My former partner. The man who built half of Chicago's import network while I built the other half. He pulled up a photo on his phone, the same face, the same careful smile that had always seemed paternal when he asked about her college plans. The man who ordered my death. Ariel's legs gave out. She sat hard on the concrete floor, her mind replaying every interaction. Every kind word. Every generous tip that had helped pay her sister's textbooks. He knows where I live, she said numbly. Last month, his driver gave me a ride home when my car broke down. I thought he was being nice. He was gathering intelligence. Jun-suk crouched beside her, his presence suddenly less threat than anchor. Chin doesn't do kindness. He invests. And now you're a liability he's already mapped. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Marcus. Also, Mr. Chen left flowers for you? They're beautiful. I'll leave them at your apartment building's front desk. Flowers. Like a funeral arrangement delivered early. My sister, Ariel breathed. She's at Northwestern. He asked about her dorm last week. I thought. Her voice broke. I told him everything. Jun-suk's hand found her shoulder, the gesture awkward but genuine. Then we move her. Tonight. Before Chen realizes you're not going to that meeting. His eyes met hers, dark with a promise that was both comfort and threat. You saved my life. Now I save yours. But understand, the moment you make that call, you cross a line you can't uncross. Ariel looked at the phone in her shaking hands, at the flowers waiting like a death sentence, and dialed her sister's number. The line had already been drawn. She just hadn't seen it until now. The Peninsula Hotel's private dining room glittered with the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. Ariel adjusted her catering uniform, black slacks, white shirt, forgettable face, and lifted a tray of champagne flutes with hands that had steadied themselves through sheer will. Her sister was safe now, hidden in a Naperville apartment under the watch of one of Jun-suk's few remaining loyal men. That knowledge was the only thing keeping Ariel's spine straight as she walked into a room full of people who wanted her dead. Chin Wayman sat at the head of the table like a patriarch at a family dinner, his silver hair catching the chandelier light. He didn't look at her as she circled the room. Why would he? Service staff were furniture, invisible unless they spilled something. It was the same invisibility that had defined her entire working life, but now it was armor. The ghost's little savior disappeared, Chin said in Korean, his voice warm with amusement. Ariel's 2 years of language study at UChicago suddenly became the most valuable education she'd never finished. No show at work. No answer at her apartment. Clever girl. She's a loose end. The man to his right growled. Park, she recognized him now as one of the gunmen from the restaurant. We should have handled her that night. Patience. Chin lifted his wine glass, studying the burgundy liquid like it held answers. She's uneducated, frightened, alone. She'll surface when the money runs out. They always do. He smiled. Besides, without Jun-suk, she's just a witness to a choking incident. The police found nothing. No bodies, no evidence. Just an unfortunate evening and a paranoid staff. Ariel's hands didn't shake as she refilled water glasses, her body on autopilot, while her mind catalogued every word. The small recording device Jun-suk had given her was taped against her ribs, no larger than a lipstick, capturing everything. The Seoul Council arrives Friday, another voice added. Min, Jun-suk's former lieutenant, the betrayal written in every obsequious word. They'll want proof the ghost is eliminated before they transfer operational control. Then we give them proof. Chin set down his glass with precise finality. Friday night. The old warehouse on Cermak. We leak the location through the usual channels. If Jun-suk is alive, his pride won't let him hide. And if he's already dead from the poison, he shrugged, we simply stage the body. Ariel moved to the next guest, her face a mask of professional neutrality even as her pulse hammered in her ears. A trap. Designed specifically for a man whose ego was as legendary as his violence. More champagne? She asked in perfect, unaccented English, her voice pitched to the servile tone she'd perfected over years of being overlooked. Chin glanced at her then, his eyes passing over her face without recognition. No, thank you. She nodded, retreating toward the kitchen with information that would either save Jun-suk's life or confirm that her old world was gone forever. The safe house gun range existed in the bones of an old meatpacking plant, the walls still stained with rust that might have been something else once. Jun-suk set the Glock on the table between them with the reverence of a man introducing a dangerous friend. You can't stay invisible forever, he said quietly. Eventually they'll see you. And when they do, you need to be ready. Ariel stared at the weapon like it was a snake. I've never. I know. He picked it up, his movements careful, educational. That's why you're still alive. Chin thinks you're harmless. Frightened. A victim. His eyes met hers. Prove him wrong. She took the gun, its weight foreign and terrible in her hands. Jun-suk moved behind her, his presence close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the sharp scent of antiseptic from his healing wound mixing with something darker. Gunpowder, perhaps, or the metallic tang of a life spent in violence. His hands covered hers, adjusting her grip with the patience of a man who understood that survival was a skill that had to be taught. "Breathe," he instructed. "The gun doesn't care about your fear. It only responds to your intention." She fired. The recoil shocked through her arms, the sound devastating even through ear protection. The target's shoulder exploded with paper fragments, off-center, but not a miss. Again. They worked in silence, the rhythm of it almost meditative. Load. Aim. Fire. Reload. Her hands learned the language of metal and powder, her body adapting to a violence she'd never wanted to understand. When her arms finally shook with exhaustion, Jun-suk took the weapon and set it aside. "The recording you got, it's good intelligence," he said, his voice softer now. "But it tells me something more important. Chin thinks I'll walk into his trap alone because he believes I trust no one." He paused. "He's right. I didn't. Until you." Ariel sank onto a metal folding chair, her muscles burning. "I'm not asking for your trust. I'm just trying to survive. Same thing in my world." Jun-suk sat across from her, and for the first time, she saw past the ghost of soul to something more human underneath. "I've been betrayed by blood, by brothers, by men who swore oaths in temples. But you—" He gestured at the recording device on the table, at the target she'd shredded with inexperienced determination. "You have no reason to risk yourself except that you believe people shouldn't be killed over dinner. Radical concept," she said dryly. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "In my world? Revolutionary." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife, traditional Korean, the handle wrapped in black silk. "This was my father's. He taught me that debts are paid in blood or loyalty. I have no more blood to give, but my loyalty." He placed the blade on the table between them. "Is yours." Ariel looked at the knife, understanding the weight of what he was offering. "Then teach me who to trust. Because I can't tell anymore." "Simple," Jun-suk said. "Trust the ones who have more to lose than gain." The tea house existed in a pocket of the city that Chicago had forgotten, a narrow building wedged between a dry cleaner and a shuttered grocery, its sign written in Hangul characters that glowed soft amber in the afternoon light. Ariel adjusted the tailored black suit Jun-suk had procured, the fabric expensive enough to rewrite her social class with a single glance. The gun pressed against her ribs felt like a second heartbeat. "The poisoner's name is Dr. Yoon," Jun-suk said quietly as they approached. His hand rested at the small of her back, possessive, protective, the gesture of a man with a woman he valued. "She's not loyal to Chin. She's loyal to money. And she keeps the antidote because poisoners always do. Insurance. And if she doesn't want to sell?" His smile was cold. "Then we take it." The interior smelled like jasmine and secrets. Traditional low tables lined the space, each one occupied by people who looked too comfortable with silence. An elderly woman in a hanbok approached, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Kong," she said in Korean, her tone neither welcoming nor hostile. "I heard you were dead. Disappointed?" Jun-suk replied, his voice smooth. "Curious." Her gaze shifted to Ariel, assessing. "And you've brought new company. How American of you." Ariel met the woman's eyes, channeling every moment she'd ever had to prove herself in rooms that didn't want her there. "Dr. Yoon," she said in careful Korean, her accent Chicago rough but comprehensible. "We're here to discuss a transaction." Something flickered in the old woman's expression, respect, perhaps, or calculation. "Sit." They folded themselves onto cushions at a corner table, the traditional setup forcing an intimacy that felt like a negotiation in itself. Dr. Yoon poured tea with movements that were almost ceremonial. "The poison I created for Mr. Chun was designed to mimic natural causes. Cardiac arrest from a blockage." She sipped her tea. I assume it didn't work as intended. It worked, Jun-suk said flatly. I'm just harder to kill than he anticipated. And the antidote? Ariel asked, her hands steady around the delicate cup despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. Dr. Yoon's smile was thin. Expensive. $50,000. Done, Ariel said before Jun-suk could respond. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to something harder. But I want something else. The name of everyone Chin hired for Friday night. Every hitter, every cleaner, every person walking into that warehouse. The doctor's eyebrows rose. That information could start a war. The war already started, Ariel countered. We're just deciding who survives it. Dr. Yoon studied her for a long moment, then looked at Jun-suk. She's not what I expected. No one ever is, he replied, and there was something almost proud in his voice. The doctor reached into her hanbok and produced a small vial of clear liquid. The antidote. And the list. She slid both across the table. Consider it an investment in the future. Chen's reign has become tedious. Ariel pocketed both, her heart steady now. Smart investment. The Drake Hotel ballroom dripped with old money and older sins. Ariel descended the marble staircase in a gown that cost more than 3 months of her former rent, midnight blue silk that transformed her from invisible service staff into someone who belonged among the predators. Her hair fell in soft waves instead of the tight bun that had defined her working life, and the diamond earrings Jun-suk had provided caught the light like shattered ice. Chin Wei-min stood at the center of the room, holding court with the sole council members who had flown in to witness his ascension. He didn't see her. None of them did. They saw wealth, beauty, confidence, everything except the waitress who had saved the wrong man's life. Ms. Brooks. Park materialized at her elbow, his smile predatory. He was Chen's head of security, the man who had fired the first shot in the restaurant. I don't believe we've been introduced. Haven't we? Ariel accepted a champagne flute from a passing server, her voice carrying the borrowed accent of private schools and trust funds. I'm sure I've seen you somewhere. Do you frequent the Gilded Lily? His expression flickered, confusion, then calculation. Perhaps. And you're here with? Myself. She sipped the champagne, her eyes scanning the room with the careful attention of someone looking for exits. I find these events tedious without proper motivation. Park's hand moved toward his jacket, the gesture subtle but unmistakable. Ariel's pulse hammered, but her face remained a mask of bored aristocracy. Then a voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. There you are, darling. I've been looking everywhere. Jun-suk emerged from the crowd in a tuxedo that made him look less like a gangster and more like old Korean royalty. His hand found the small of her back, that touched both claim and shield. Park's face went corpse pale. Impossible, he breathed. Disappointing, isn't it? Jun-suk's smile was arctic. When the dead refused to stay buried. The ballroom's ambient noise died like someone had cut the sound. Chin turned, his champagne glass freezing halfway to his lips. The sole council members stepped back instinctively, their survival instincts recognizing an apex predator even in formal wear. Khan Jun-suk, Chin said, his voice steady despite the visible calculation happening behind his eyes. You're looking well for a corpse. I had excellent help. Jun-suk's hand tightened fractionally on Ariel's waist. And even better intelligence. Did you know your entire network talks too freely around service staff? They never do learn. Ariel reached into her clutch, not for the gun, but for the USB drive containing Dr. Yoon's list and the damning recordings from the peninsula. She held it up like a playing card. Every name. Every location. Every transaction. Her voice carried across the silent ballroom with the clarity of someone who had spent years projecting over ambient noise. The FBI receives a copy in. She checked her watch. 30 minutes. Unless you'd prefer to negotiate terms. Chen's mask finally cracked. You're just a waitress. I was, Ariel corrected, her smile sharp as broken glass. Now I'm the woman who owns your empire. The warehouse on Cermak had been meant as a tomb. Instead, it became a coronation. Chen knelt on the concrete floor, his silver hair disheveled for the first time since Ariel had known him. Park and Min flanked him, their hands zip-tied behind their backs, their expensive suits incongruous against the industrial decay. The Seoul Council stood in a semicircle, their faces carefully neutral as they recalculated allegiances with the speed of men who survived by reading power shifts. Jun-suk stood before them, his presence filling the space with an authority that needed no weapon to enforce it. But it was Ariel who held their attention, the woman in the midnight gown who had walked into their world and rewritten its rules. You made a mistake, Jun-suk said quietly, his voice carrying in the vast space. You assumed loyalty could be bought and sold like any other commodity. You forgot that some debts are paid in blood, and some are paid in something more valuable. His hand gestured toward Ariel. Trust earned, not purchased. Chen's laugh was bitter. You're going to let a waitress stand beside you? The council will never accept. The council, interrupted the eldest member, a man named Song whose reputation preceded him by decades, recognizes strength wherever it reveals itself. His eyes fixed on Ariel with something between respect and wariness. Ms. Brooks infiltrated our security, recorded our plans, and negotiated with Dr. Yoon, a woman who hasn't taken a meeting in 5 years. She did in 1 week what takes most operatives a lifetime to learn. I had motivation, Ariel said simply. You threatened my sister. That was your second mistake. And the first? Chen asked, his voice hollow. Thinking invisible meant powerless. She moved to stand beside Jun-suk, their shoulders aligned. I've spent my entire life being overlooked. Watching. Listening. Learning how power moves through rooms like weather patterns. You taught me everything I needed to know about your world. You just didn't realize you were teaching. Jun-suk's hand found hers, not romantic, but something deeper. A partnership forged in poison and gunfire, in the space between who they had been and who they were becoming. The ghost of Seoul is dead, he announced to the assembly. What remains is something new. A structure built on merit, not birthright. On capability, not ceremony. Song nodded slowly. And Ms. Brooks? What is her position in this new structure? Ariel met his gaze without flinching. I'm the person who sees what everyone else misses. The one who knows that the real power isn't in the boardroom or the back alley. It's an understanding that every person in this city has a story, a pressure point, a reason they do what they do. She paused. I'm the person who makes sure we never forget that. She's my conscience, Jun-suk added, his voice carrying a weight that made it more than partnership, more than strategy. And my shield. The Seoul Council bowed, not deeply, but enough. The girl who had counted tips to keep her sister in college was gone. In her place stood someone who had learned that survival wasn't about staying invisible. It was about choosing when to be seen.